Next up, we've got Paul Stone to speak. Paul is from the Secretariat for Open Government Data and Information from the Department of Internal Affairs. So, Paul, I'm most interested in hearing about the Open Data program, so the stage is yours.
Okay, well, good morning. Sorry, quick correction to the program. We're actually hosted in Linz, but we work cross-government, and we've been focusing on central government, but we're now getting out much broader. Colin actually took away a fair bit of my thunder this morning, but that's actually really good news. I'm really pleased to see that someone's in a consulting role advising you all with very much open data at the forefront of his thinking. So that's excellent. So what I want to tell you about this morning really is just the government policies within New Zealand and what their intention is, and then to give you some reasons as to why to think open and some hopefully excite you with some examples of reuse of local authority data. So, very simply, open data is data that anyone can access and share. Okay, so the barriers to the data are minimal. For the New Zealand context, the NZGOAL, which is the New Zealand Government Open Access Licensing, is a very important part of open data. Okay, so not only is data to be out there and available, but people need to know that they can reuse it. And we push very strongly for non-proprietary and machine-readable format. Okay, we see that as a basic first step. Any interpretation or making more human-readable is an add-on beyond that, and that usually involves investment, but at the very least we want machine readable. So open government really has these key things: New Zealand Government Open Access Licensing, the New Zealand Data and Information Management Principles, we've got data.govt.nz portal, and we've got the Declaration of Open and Transparent Government. So I'll go through each of these things, starting with what I think is the most fundamental part of the Open Data and Information Program. Okay, so NZGOAL is about guiding publicly funded agencies how to apply Creative Commons licensing. And it's to data, it's to information, it's to your websites, it's to your annual reports, it's to your glossy brochures about things. Everything should be considered a public information asset, which by rights should be available for the public to reuse, unless there are concerns of privacy or restriction. Key thing to remember is copyright is about ownership, and licensing is about giving permission to use. Now, the wonderful thing about Creative Commons is it does about three things. It's useful. It's done all the legwork for you in terms of writing legal permissions. Okay, you can just pick them up and use them. Creative Commons Aotearoa have had a big input into version 4 of Creative Commons, so we, with some confidence, can advise you that Creative Commons version 4.0 you can confidently use in the New Zealand context. Okay. The second thing it does is people coming to use your data or information, immediately they see that. Once they've been once or twice, they know what it means. Okay, so by seeing CCBY, you know that you can use my slides any way you want, reuse them as many times, adapt them. All you have to do is attribute me as the source. That's the only requirement. Okay, there are about 6 different variations of Creative Commons, getting more and more restricted for different purposes. There are situations where non-commercial applies. So CCNC is telling you that you can freely reuse this but not make money out of it. To give an example, the Met Service and their real-time forecast is the bread and butter of their existence. We're working with them about how we can change that, and they might require policy change, etc. But for the time being, if people can make money from their real-time forecast, then they're going to struggle to exist. But generally, CCBY is what we promote as the default. Training videos, huge long URL. All our resources are on ict.govt.nz. But if you just Google NZGOAL videos, you'll get the videos. So we have had training from Wellington and training central government on NZGOAL, about an hour and a half to 2 hour training session. We've broken that down into 13 bite-sized parts and made them online so that you can get to them anywhere in the country. I recommend you have a look because they're broken down. They give you an overview, but they break down to different aspects like applying it to data or procuring copyright resources, different aspects of applying rights. So recommend you have a look at those and then think about who in your organisations might need to see them. For example, your legal team. Okay, legal teams think they need to write new rules on everything, but the work's been done for them. And if they can get familiar with it, then that's one less barrier for you to apply it where you see it should be applied. Comms teams is another area. So the whole aspect of publishing, anybody involved with publishing should be familiar with NZGOAL. Okay, New Zealand data and information management principles. Okay, these were released in 2011. They're a little bit dated now. The Open Data Institute of the UK and the World Wide Web Foundation have collaborated to create an open data charter that they're promoting through right now in Mexico is the Open Government Partnership Summit, trying to get a global adoption of principles. Our program is going to evaluate those principles against these ones that we established in 2011 and perhaps consult about what people think about adopting those instead. But it's basic it's basic information management. Okay, we just encourage open by default, but where privacy and other restricted classified material, for example, needs to be protected, then those protections are applied as a matter of course. Making information readily available so people can access it without barriers or minimal barriers. Ensuring it's trusted and authoritative, well managed, and reasonably priced. So our expectation is that wherever possible, data and information should be reusable for free, and any costs to it should be only a case of recovering the cost. But then we'd still encourage you to think long term. It might cost you to do something short term, but in the long term it may be a minimal cost. And reusable, I'll unpack a bit further. So making information available at source, so for example, wherever possible, using APIs so people don't need to make copies. Machine readable, okay. Machine readable, there's a debate at the moment, well, has always been there, I guess, about machine readable versus human readable. But if you work on the principle that machine readable is by default, then you can then apply some investment to make it more human readable, to interpret the data, to visualise it, whatever. But you're also allowing the possibility of others doing that either on your behalf or perhaps showing different insights through their own interpretation. And before it was mentioned, good metadata is really important to give the context to the data. And it's kind of mentioned twice there, which is why we need to revise, but yeah, there's a balance to strike on privacy between a level of granularity which is useful to people and meaningful, but also protects privacy. There's no hard and fast rule on that because every data set's different, and then even potentially the data sets that might be meshed with adds different risks. So it's not an easy one to answer, but there is guidance from Statistics New Zealand on privacy assessment methodologies, and they are the government experts, if you like, and so you should feel that you can go and ask for their advice or even come through us because we have a relationship through a data champion with Statistics New Zealand, and I know that she's encouraging all public agencies to use them wherever they think it's appropriate. So they are the experts in protecting privacy through anonymisation, they call it, or aggregation. Okay, data.govt.nz. This is like a library catalogue. Okay, it's like if you think analogue, it's some cards. Each record in here has some metadata about the data you're looking for, a description, when it was released, and then has a pointer to go find the data. So there is no data itself in data.govt.nz, but it's a discovery tool. So you can come here and search the metadata, or through the categories, or through keyword search, and find what you want. So there's 3,500 data sets there now. This screenshots of a search for health, and there's 143 data sets up there. It's designed to create a one-stop shop for people to find data. So while we're really pleased to see open data portals at Otago Regional Council and Waikato Regional Council and other places, if people want to find water data, they don't have to go to each portal that exists. They can come to data.gov and find all the data sets wherever they are across the country. Okay, so the declaration is what really brought everything together. In August 2011, Cabinet Cabinet directed central government agencies, and it encouraged the wider public the state sector, so that's the Crown Research Institutes, Crown entities, SOEs, and invited local government to do these things, to release open, publicly funded data that's non-personal, unclassified, data that has potential value, high potential for reuse, okay, and that's where we have to get out and engage with our stakeholders to find out what they think is valuable. We have our own ideas, but sometimes we can be surprised about what others find useful. Should be managed according to the principles and licensed for reuse using NZGOAL and published on data.gov. So the declaration is binding all those things together and encouraging people to do it in a consistent way. The point of our program is to encourage and support that release of data and information, help you know about it and adopt NZGOAL and the principles. But also, increasingly, we're getting out and getting amongst the user communities to try and get an understanding of what is of value to the user communities. And it's by doing that that we're aware now that our focus has been on those directed in central government, and we've been helping them release the data, but more and more of the user communities are telling us that the data they really value is held in the wider government and local government. So here I am, letting you know that your data is valued. In fact, it's been on my to-do list actually to publish on the ICT some feedback we got on just what data sets they are. So I'll make a commitment here and now to get on and do that. So, and I'll send it to Neil and he can distribute because it's useful to know what people are asking for. Actually, what I didn't mention back here on data.gov.nz is that people can actually make requests here for data. So, and the exciting thing is that we are close to getting those requests recognised as Official Information Act requests, okay, which means that agencies will need to respond. Now, they can request your data there from regional councils, local councils, or wherever you're any public funded agency, okay? So, Department of Internal Affairs hosts the site. They have someone looking after the requests and will send them to the agency that holds the data, or at least the starting point if they don't know from there. And there's a whole, these are actually followed by communities, and the conversations that go on about the release of the data is all publicly as well. Okay, so this is a valuable source of information about what people find valuable. Okay, so at a very high level, why are we encouraging you to be open with your data and information? Okay, it's expected, and we're starting to realise, in reality, increased social and economic benefits through new products and services. Increased efficiencies, sharing data amongst yourselves. If it's open, you don't need to go and ask. It will create an MOU. You should just be able to go and grab what data you need. You know, in a perfect world, the natural resources sector would be, a large portion of it will be open data, so that when a new initiative arrives that needs data, it can go and get it immediately. And of course, there's increased transparency and democracy. And you know, I've worked in government for 30 years, and transparency scares me. I can think of somebody looking over my shoulder every move. But more and more, we're realising that, and we're seeing it internationally, increased transparency actually builds trust and confidence in government. Okay, people feel that they're involved if they can see what's happening. Okay, the fun stuff. What people can do with data. Okay, Mojo is a company in Christchurch. They just actually, I was thinking about whether they could do a presentation for us in Christchurch next week, but they're over in Australia. They're branching out and creating a new branch in Australia. So this was their first app. It's using local government data, as well as central government data, as well as private sector data. Okay, does anybody here know about Campermade? Because apparently 110,000 people have downloaded it. Okay, great tool for travelling. This was their first app, and they made it free, which has probably helped with the downloads. But it's just such a great concept, because I can travel anywhere in New Zealand and I can find out, you know, I arrive in a town I haven't been in before. Where's the supermarket? Where can I dump rubbish? Where can I camp for free? Where can I, you know, where are the paid camp places? Where's the police station? Where's the hospital? It's all brought in here from multiple data sets, and they also crowdsource. So if you find something that's not in there, you can actually feed it into the app and it builds the data. MarineMate was using regulations from regional authorities as well as information from the Coast Guard, and helps boaties know what they can and can't do out on the water, as well as bringing in any notices about conditions at the time. Now, I don't know if this has got beyond prototype. Is Andre from MPI here? Does he know if that has got beyond prototype? But sorry, a long way off. Okay, not a long way off, right. So I just am aware that Pest Control is part of responsibilities in the regional councils as well. Whether or not this is a tool that could be useful, it helps everybody identify out in the field pests, or whether it's something that can contribute to or build on. Just another example, open legislation has contributed to fishing rules. You know, are there contexts in your areas where you could use legislation or regulations as open data could feed into making something more useful for people? In this case, you know, how to identify fish and how many you're allowed to catch and what size and so forth. Okay, Thunder Maps is another growing business. It's established in New Zealand and now it's just opened up a branch in Sweden and working on one in London. Now, this is a spatial alerting system where they take data into their system that is about events in a location, real time. Okay, so they have both a private and a public sort of library of data going through, and private ones for specific cases for companies, so they adapt the application or the platform for that. But they've got over 100 public data sets going through, everything from fire alerts, trade me property, so if I want to know if a house comes up for sale. As a user, I mark on a map where I'm interested in. Anything happens within that fenced off area, it will tell me. Or another alternative is within a radius of my device, so within a 5K location of my phone. It's being used internationally as well. I think you can even find out if there's been a UAV strike in Iraq through the system, through a public library. I use it mapped out between the route between work and home, and every day, well, not every day, fortunately, but whenever there's an incident on the roads between me and home, I get an email in my pocket to say it's happened, so I can take an alternative route or delay when I leave. So, yeah, is there anything like that in your realms that could use it? Here is the platform. All it needs is the open data. Okay, so moving forward, I think there's 3 things that we can bear in mind. If we embed open data as a requirement of any new system, then as we replace legacy systems, we're becoming ready to be open. It's really just another reporting output. So there's no reason why any new system now isn't capable of producing open data. Publishing processes. I mentioned before the comms people or anybody involved with publishing should know about NZGOAL. But if they think about open data as the output at the start of a process as well, when you think about publishing a heavily formatted spreadsheet and you decide to put a copy on the website for people, along the journey it has been simple data that could be outputted as a CSV, for example, to make it open and machine readable. It just takes thinking about that output along the way. It's kind of like how we shifted from publishing everything in glossy paper or PDF format, and then had to change the way that we published or thought about publishing when we started using websites as our primary medium. Well, now we're actually thinking about open data as another possible primary medium to be communicating with people. Yeah, and the story behind this third thing, historically we haven't thought about data as part of service delivery. And I was just last week talking with the folk from Waimakariri Council, and I was trying to help them realise that not all data was geospatial data, that there's other stuff that might be on their website as information that could also be made available as data as well to be consumed. And the example I thought of was rubbish collection schedules. It could be incorporated in an app to help people know when their collection is. I mean, for example, in Wellington they have recycling, general recycling one day, glass the next week. I can never remember which one it is. And they said, well, the rubbish collectors, they're useless. They don't tell us when things change. And even if they did tell us when things change, they don't have the capacity to provide data about it. So I said, well, okay, you can't change that today. But when that contract comes up for renewal, put it in there as a requirement, because it's going to enable you to better inform your customers about the schedule. And you'll find that somebody will find a way to do it in order to get the contract. And if you make it for just a year and see how it goes and then put it up again, suddenly everyone else will realise, well, if we're going to be doing these services, we need to find a way to incorporate data about the service as well. So it takes time, but if you think about these things as you go, then it can make a difference. Okay, just to inspire you with some international examples. Cities and states around the world have a different array of services than you will, but this idea of having a performance dashboard, if you like, is a really good way of publicly tracking progress against things that are important. Okay, and it's a way of engaging your stakeholders and helping them feel like they're participating. And I've put an example of how you can turn something from being that's going to highlight we're failing at something, to actually getting people involved and behind you. Was, say, for example, heading into drought season, we need to conserve water as a community. why not use something like this to have water usage monitored against goals, and then use that as a promotion and get people coming to the site and see how we're doing. You know, it's a case of adapting this concept to what your goals are and what you want your stakeholders to be engaged in. Reno in the States, this is just a very challenging example. They have a completely open checkbook. Okay, you can drill down right down to the transaction level of all of their expenditure. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. You might not want to go that far, but it gets people feeling that they, or your constituents, trust that you are doing the right thing by their money, by their rates. And yeah, London was a very attractive portal as well, but they've got a different slant. For example, when there's a failure of the trains, they visualise that in terms of taking the data and running some calculations and saying what the impact was, say, for example, on local businesses' loss of revenue. Okay, so that is really me. There's some contact details. I will get the slideshow up on SlideShare and send a link to Neil to distribute if you wanted to share it with others. And yeah, I'll leave that there for a while. Is there any questions? Neil. Oh.
So the Creative Commons license, has there been any test cases where data has been taken and polluted and somebody's been prosecuted? Is question one. And question two is, what is the position of the NZGOAL at an international level? So i.e. we've got this open data, the Americans come and take this wonderful data and use it into their data sets. What is the position on that one as well?
Okay. First question, I don't know of any test cases. So yeah, I'd have to research that one. The second one is, we have no problem. It's about being part of a global community as well as a national community. If somebody takes your data and can sell it overseas in a new form, it might be that we can take advantage of it as well. Yeah, I mean that is the philosophy behind Open. You know, if they can do it, well, why can't somebody here in New Zealand do it as well? Yeah.
Paul, I've got a quick question. Is any work being done on categorising the national data sets in terms of value to the nation?
No, not formally. We have been using the G8 list as a first indicator, but yeah, that is something that we're actually starting to build up now because of the fact that we're getting a chance to get out amongst the user communities more. So we want that list to be available, but we want to get out and find what others think of that rather than make it up ourselves.
Quick follow-on question there. What about validating those shared data sets? Is there any standardised processes coming out to validate or certify the data being published?
Okay, so is there any validation of the data sets in terms of the quality that coming out? No, not at this point in time. But one thing we are looking at is the Open Data Institute have done some research on what they call open data certificates. And that is really a process of publishing a piece of metadata next to the data and answering a number of questions around the history behind the data and the processes behind release. So it's kind of like a warrant of fitness. So that is one thing we're keeping an eye on. But yeah, that is, and that's something that we might have to then link into the natural resources sector or the social sector to get some more specific data interoperability requirements, or yeah.
Yeah, the comment was made earlier about the importance of metadata, and then you made the comment about data.gov and the various portals out there. I just wondered, given that technically we know how to move metadata around, it's probably the easiest thing we can do. I just wonder how many of the portals you mentioned are either publishing to or being harvested by data.gov.
Okay, good question. DIA are currently going through a refresh of data.govt.nz, and the automation of that harvesting is one of the things taken under consideration. At this point in time, there is automated updating of data.gov from coordinates, so Ministry for Environment and LINZ and New Zealand Defence Force, ECANs, are all releasing their data through coordinates, and that's being automated up to data.gov.nz. MPI, I think, are automating. Yeah, so it's very much on the case-by-case basis at the moment. There is the capability for data.gov to receive feeds. In some cases, depending on the volumes of data, some agencies are just creating a CSV file and sending it to data.gov, and it populates in bulk. Yeah, so the capability is there, and it's hopefully will be improved over the next 6 months.
Jim from Digital Stock here. When you were talking before about formats of data, do you feel that a standardised format in terms of, say, XML, JSON, not the data itself, is something that we should look at keeping the same, or do you think having options for, say, being able to provide this data in different formats is a good or positive thing, or do you think it's best keeping it under one kind of standard?
Okay. I think, well, we tend to encourage multiple where you see that there's value in doing it. You know, I mentioned before, you know, releasing something on a website, but also, oh no, I didn't actually, I was thinking it. But, you know, when you release something on a website, you make it available as CSV as well. So making machine readable and human readable available. When it comes to some more complex, like for example, some people prefer to use JSON, or others might prefer, you know, the geospatial data some have capability of just using CSV as opposed to JSON. Yeah, so this really comes back to getting to know your stakeholders and what they're using the data for. It might be that you've released it in one format because you've got the systems to do that easily, and you find out that everybody's been cursing you behind their back because they have to do so much work converting it for their use. You know, Statistics New Zealand are going through that realisation at the moment that they've been producing data one way, and they've been finding out that people have been cursing them, and they need to release it another way. So, yeah, as I say, get in touch with your stakeholders, find out who's using your data. And that also brings me to the point that if you're finding out people are using your data, tell us, because it's a cycle. The more stories that we can gather about data being reused, the more people realise the value of opening up data, and the more that they'll prioritise the release of further data. So please let us know.
Coming back to the formats just a little bit, for data.govt.nz, is there any not consideration, sort of relation to some metadata elements like Dublin Core or NZLIC?
That's a very good question. They purposely didn't go Dublin Core when they first established it back in 2009. But if there is value in it, in them adopting that now, that you see very strongly, let me know and I can feed that back into, as I say, the time is right now because they're gathering requirements. Oh, by the way, I haven't mentioned Open NZ. Is anybody aware of Open NZ and the Open Government Ninjas forum? Okay, it's a completely open forum at open.org.nz. And as I say, Government Ninjas is the forum where people are talking about those kind of issues all the time. And so we monitor them, well, we engage in that forum. So it's also a place that you might be able to go and find some insights.
Quickly, regarding the Campermade application, you said so they live off a sort of catalog from open data from the government, and then they also crowdsource data. And under which license is that crowdsourced data? If that goes back into the pool, how does that license Measure work?
I believe it's Creative Commons that they license it. So what they crowdsource, they make available. Obviously, it's not available through the app as open data, but if you approach them, they would make that data available. Yeah.
You're doing nice introductions to my questions. You were talking about if you've heard of any uses of data, and the comment was made about the importance of data use metrics and so on. So how do you do that? Because we find that we release data, we actually get users to register so we can go back to them, but most data are put up without any user registration. So how do you collect the data on use, downstream use, so you can actually go back to your funders, your sponsors, and say, this data has value, we should spend more money there, or this data has no value, and so on? What works?
Don't know yet. It is really hard because, I mean, we encourage minimal barriers, so getting people to sign up with lots of information and commitment to tell us how you're using it is not something we actually encourage, even though we'd... So there are things that you can do. Just a minimal email request, I mean, if nothing else, to notify them of changes to the data source, but that also gives you a mechanism to contact and reach out. But yeah, at the source of people getting your data, encourage them to tell it, feedback to you. So it's really about, in the public space, trying to open up those doors and encouraging people to tell you. And otherwise, thinking about how you get out and hold sessions. I mean, like we're, for example, starting to run public sessions to make them aware of open data, but we're also using it as a vehicle for people, once they realise, oh, okay, I knew about open data because I've seen it used here, tell us. So it's about getting out in the community as much as you can, and it might be you get out there for another purpose, but you also try and gather those stories by talking to people as well. But it's, yeah, there's no hard and fast way. As soon as you try and bind people to tell me how you're using your data, they go, oh, stuff you. That's human nature. But so it's just about, the more we talk about the stories of reuse, the more people will be conscious and will share.
Paul, if I could just ask another question. I've obviously got a bee in my bonnet about certification. It's obviously fairly immature at this stage, is what you indicated earlier. What sort of principles do you see around the certification process for data and key data sets coming forward? And is governance, the level of governance around the data, one of them?
Yes, the level of governance around the data is certainly part of the Open Data Institute's certificate base. And it's really about fit for purpose, I think, is. And so, once again, stakeholders are important because we don't know what the purpose, you know what your purpose for the data is, but once it's released, it's about knowing what other people are using it for. So therefore, what's the quality, what's the interoperability requirements that you need? Going back to the formats, what are the formats that the people are using? So yeah, I can't emphasise that enough about stakeholders. You need to find out from them to know whether or not your data is going to be good. And the only way to do that is get out there and have the conversations.
I personally quite like the concept of a confidence interval in data sets. So you could say we're 75% confident in that data set as a sort of standard.
Okay.
I know that would be ambitious to implement, but it would give people a feel for how much weight they can put on the using that data and for what purpose.
That's a very good point, because often we get agencies saying to us, well, we can't release that because it's not accurate. So that would be a really good way of managing that, and users can then use the data knowing how much confidence to put in it and not to depend their life on it if it's not somewhere up above 90%, for example. Yeah, I like that.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I just
Right.
want to say thank you, Paul.
Thank you.